he has no idea what's even going on, and everyone's trying to kill him, which is a pretty good reason for being broody, I would think. So we're going to talk, I guess, for a little bit about the brooding heroes that we've used in our own books and stories, and how that affected the dynamics with the other characters, and how it kind of impacted how our stories played out, planned or unplanned. So I guess we can start with your Grimm series, because I know you definitely have a brooding character in that series.
Well, Will and Jay Grimm are both a little brooding in their own ways, but Will kind of takes it to another level. He just sort of instinctually ended up being this brooding character, because as the book is progressing, I know what's coming for him and what's happened in his past, and it just put me in a mood where I felt really bad for him. And that kind of translated on the page of him being very broody and distant and angsty, and to a point where he kind of was snippy and mean to try to keep distance from Kella. You do find out in book one all the reasons for that. And then I think his broodiness sort of makes way to just being this really sarcastic kind of person for the rest of the series. He's never as broody through the rest of the series as he is in the first book. But I think some other characters sort of pick up where he left off. Like in the second book, Eli is kind of sarcastic and broody. And his is a defense mechanism, though. It's not necessarily, I mean, he's had a crummy backstory, but for him, it's more of a defense mechanism because of a fear of like rejection. Like he doesn't want to be rejected by this person who doesn't remember him, but he has all these feelings for, and that just comes across as being very. I think those are the only really, really brooding characters in the Grimm series, but we need to talk about Lex.
Lex. Okay, so for those who don't know, Lex is the main character of the Lex Chronicles, which is the first trilogy that's in the larger Legends of Arameth series. It's the only trilogy out right now, but there will be more books coming in this series. So Lex, trying to think how to explain this without spoilers, so I'm just gonna have to go really generic. Lex is initially really broody because he has no idea what's even going on, and everyone's trying to kill him, which is a pretty good reason for being broody, I would think. And then as the story goes on, he learns more about the reasons that people are after him, and the more he learns, the more reasons really he has to be brooding, honestly. And so he's a brooding character for the majority of that series, because he can't escape these things that have happened in the past. Mm-hmm. And so until he figures out how to fix them to change his future, he feels stuck and trapped by this. And so that's a huge element of his character throughout the whole series. It's a huge part of his motivation and the dynamics of how he interacts with other people. And then Icarius, who becomes Lex's best friend, is not overall a brooding character necessarily. I compared to Lex, he's like more mild in his brooding. But he also he's carrying this weight of these secrets that he can't reveal at first. And some of them are secrets related to people he cares about. And then he also has his own secret of his feelings for someone that he doesn't feel free to admit, because he believes that his love for her would distract her from her purpose. He doesn't want to put her in the position of choosing between him and what she needs to do and what she wants to do. So he just doesn't tell her how he feels for like ever. Eventually he does. So they're both definitely brooding heroes. And that plays out in the dynamic of all the characters, interacting with them over the whole series. It ends up pushing Lex into some rather rash decisions at points.
No.
Especially when new things happen that push his brooding over the edge, because he's already trapped in his situation, and then a new tragedy occurs that he kind of snaps. And so he goes into like his dark period, right? So yeah, they're definitely MJ is biting her tongue. She's like, these are the things we don't speak of.
It's going to be a spoiler, so I can't comment on any of it.
Right. But yeah, so they're both definitely brooding heroes for the majority of the series, even though they do eventually get into better places in life. Well, I was just going to say my original, I guess the first brooding character I ever wrote wasn't a fantasy character. I wrote my initial sort of breakout series, oddly enough, was this cheesy teen romance that I wrote on Wattpad. And it's the one that ended up getting like over 1.5 million views or something. Not as many as your Yellow Note series, actually. What?
It's our friendship origin story.
It is, yes. For those of you who don't know, MJ and I actually met on Wattpad. We were both writing teen romance, and we sort of stumbled upon each other's stories because we had mutual readers. And that's how we became friends, and now we co-write and everything. So that this story is actually, you know, our friendship origin story. But I wrote a teen romance story where it was sort of a mystery. She's getting these like secret admirer notes, and she's trying to figure out the entire story is told through emails and texts. But the one of the love interests in that story, because readers loved him so much, they wanted to see his point of view. So I eventually wrote like a spin-off series that was from the points of view of the different, I called it the 5 suspects, because it's actually from the POV of the 5 different people she thinks might possibly be the ones sending her the notes. And so the main guy, who actually is the one sending her the notes, is super broody for that entire, like, once you actually get into his POV and you realize what he was thinking the whole time, it's really, really broody, because he is he has fallen in love with her, but he doesn't feel like he can tell her. And then every time he thinks he's making progress, there's other competing love interests that get in the way. And so it's just a very brooding dynamic for his entire POV. But readers loved it. They were just like really, really, really sympathetic for him and rooting for him. So
I would have any sort of sympathy for the ex-boyfriend.
yes, MJ was rooting for the other. He was sort of rooting as well, but he covered it. He masked it with like arrogance.
Yeah.
But he was brooding as well, which when you actually see his POV and you realize what was behind this act he was putting on, then you realize he's brooding too. So MJ was rooting for him for sure.
I always root for the underdog though, so I mean.
And then there's Nox, who was your other brooding hero.
So in the Eaigan's Winter, it's actually a History of Grandin trilogy, but in Eaigan's story, Nox is her sort of right-hand man in her military, and he is completely in love with her. But as far as he knows, the feelings are not returned, and he's constantly trying to get her attention by doing really stupid things that get him punished to the point where she actually banishes him to go work away from her. And throughout the story, as you learn the backstory for both characters, you sort of start to see why she was that way to him. And you get to understand why he became this broody, angsty, I will do anything to get your attention sort of character. And then his character in the second book, I think he kind of has started to make this turn in the second book where he's not so broody, he's not so angsty anymore. Things happen in book 2 that push him back into kind of a worse position than he was in the first book. And he becomes broody and not even just broody, but broody and angsty and angry. So we haven't seen his hero arc yet because I'm working on book 3, but we actually, this isn't really a spoiler because it's just a point of view, but you will get to see Nox's point of view in the 3rd book, and his broodiness has hit an all-time high, I think, so far in book 3. But his character arc's going to finish in book 3, and I think he's going to show his heroic side more in that book. But he's broody to the point that he is kind of almost arrogant, and he really has no self-preservation instinct. Like, his mood sort of takes over, and he just does stupid things, all in the name of being the broody hero. So I can't say too much, because if I say too much, then it's going to give away like what happens in book 3, and I'm not sure how many people have even read that series of mine or gotten to book 2 yet. So but watch Nox. Nox is going to do something crazy in book 3. That's all I'm going to say.
It's interesting because up until book 3, he's not a POV character. So it's interesting. I was just thinking about the difference between being in a broody character's head as the reader or author versus having one that's like a side character that's kind of cloaked in mystery. I think it's a very different dynamic. Like Lex, the whole series is in his POV. So I had to sort of, I tried to be aware of that and not just like burn people out on this angsty, brooding perspective. Because I remember when I was reading the Harry Potter series, I remember feeling, and I love that series, but I hit book 5 and Harry just flipped into teen angst for like the whole first 30% of the book at least. It gets super, super broody and angsty. And it's like this whole, it went on way too long in my opinion as a reader, where I just got annoyed with him. Like, get over yourself and like just have a conversation with him and work it out. Okay, this is enough, right? So I try when I'm writing mine, not that I always get the balance perfectly, but I try to be aware that I might like fatigue the reader, especially if they're in this character's head, because the intensity of that brooding character can get really wearing after a while. As a reader and even sometimes as an author, that tension is what keeps them engaged, even though they say like, why are you acting this way? You're being an idiot, right? But it keeps people engaged. But I was really starting to get to the point where I was like, he really is being an idiot. Like, I just, yeah.
I'm actually enjoying being in Nox head a little bit because for people who don't know, he's a dragon shifter. So I'm not just in his head, but I'm inside the head of a dragon. And I like being able to show what that's like for them, because unless you write a book from the point of view of the person who hit the shifter, you're not always necessarily getting to see how difficult this battle between your humanity and this creature is. And, you know, it adds, I think, a layer to his angstiness, because you literally turn into a reptile that breathes fire, and its only plan is, like, only thoughts are to kill things. So I'm really enjoying writing from his point of view, like the constant struggle that he has with managing this beast that's inside of him that wants to do one thing while his humanity saying, hold on, we have to do X, Y, and Z before we go all slaughter happy. And it's, I mean, you know what happened in book 2, why he would be slaughter happy at this point. So I'm really, and we talked about this, like writing the book didn't really click for me until I started writing his point of view in there. So now that like his point of view is moving along, things are feeling more like they're feeling better, like with writing. So sometimes you just have to fall into a brooding Maya hero or any kind of brooding hero's head to get the job done, I think. So yeah, I can't wait for book 3. I can't wait for you to read book 3 and Nox's point of view.
I think when you've established a character who's brooding without at first being in their head, I think their readers actually are like craving that insight, especially if they're already feeling sympathetic for the character. So I think that the readers are going to enjoy being in Knox's head and understanding a little bit more about like what his life is actually like and what motivates him. I know, like with Twilight, again, just to briefly touch on this, when she first started writing the Edward POV years ago, like years and years ago, and then it got leaked, readers were like going crazy over it. The fact that you get to see Edward's POV on this, which, I mean, like, you had the full series, you knew what happened, but there was still something about being in his angsty head that was really appealing to people. And now that the book is officially released, finally, super angsty, like really over the top angsty. But again, that is kind of intriguing to be able to go into that character's head, and to experience his like undeniable fated love for her or whatever, from his perspective. So I think, I don't know, I think that maybe the key to that is kind of establishing them as a likable hero first before you like dump the brooding on super heavy. I don't know.
As I started writing book 3 and I started playing around with Knox's point of view, his chapters are really short. They'll probably get longer as the book goes on, as I get more comfortable writing in his head. But it was definitely an interesting place to be, for sure. Igon herself was a brooding hero.
Yeah, she was brooding.
Angry brooding hero. So being in her head was one thing, but the thing is, like, being in Knox's head feels very different from being in her head because their motivations are different. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. We'll see.
While we're on the topic of brooding heroes in our books, we just wanted to quickly mention that a while back we created sort of a satirical magazine. It breaks the fourth wall a little bit, which, if you don't know what I mean by that, it kind of crosses that boundary between, like, these are fictional characters, but they're kind of interacting with the real world a little bit. But we essentially created this magazine that is called Swoonworthy Battle Heroes, and it is a crossover between our characters from various series, and they sort of have created this like elite society that you have to be inducted into. And so they are, in the initial issue of the magazine, they're interviewing, some of our characters are interviewing other of our characters from the other series. So I think like Lex and Icarius are interviewing some of your characters or vice versa, to see if they pass the bar for being initiated into this Swoonworthy Battle Heroes society, right?
Elite club.
Yeah, and so we thought it was a fun way to kind of just be in our characters' heads, because we're doing the interviews as our characters. So we actually got into a Google Doc in real time and interviewed each other as the characters and interacted that way, and it was fun. And so we have several of those interviews where we did a special edition that was like warrior women, so it was our female heroes, and then we had the original one that was more of our male heroes. And so we have several issues of that we've done interviews with various characters as the characters, that are up on both of our blogs. So I can drop the link to that in the description of this video if any of you are interested in checking those out.
I'll do them again and send them out again because it's been a while. We need to do another issue.
Yeah, it was a fun way for us to kind of keep our characters alive after we had completed the series that they were in, and to just be our characters. I used to do this on social media some, actually, where I would do these live character interviews. It was during the time period where I had the Wattpad story going, but I would actually pretend to be one of the characters and just host a chat where readers would come in and ask the character questions and I would answer in character. And it was really entertaining for me. I got really elaborate with it because this, is how I do. The phone number in the Stalker book is a real phone number that if you text, it actually goes to me and I respond. That's just how I am. So I had fun with being the character for those chats, and I actually created other social media accounts so that I could actually have other characters jump in and interrupt the chat as the other characters. So that's, I got pretty elaborate with it. But for those of you who are interested in that kind of thing, we do have some like back issues that exist that you can check out. So I'll drop those. And if you're interested in more of that in the future, let us know and maybe we can plan another kind of thing, either another issue of the magazine or maybe even like a live character chat where you can talk to some of our characters from the books. So yeah.
You probably don't want to talk to.
Beware if you're talking to Eaigan. Be careful what you ask. Okay, so I guess that wraps up our discussion on brooding heroes in fiction of various types. If anybody has questions about brooding heroes, or there's like a related topic that you want to see us talk about, an example you want us to try to analyze, not that we're like, the smartest people ever, but we can try. So if there's anything like that, drop it in the comments and we can always make additional videos on this topic in the future. So thank you for joining us, and we'll be back in a future week with a different topic of some kind about some sort of trope. So